are talking about the 1981 bizarre movie, The Pit. This one is also known as Teddy, and this one is directed by Lou Lehman, and this one stars Sammy Snyders as Jamie. So the story here focuses on this young 12-year-old boy called Jamie, and he is a bit of a loner, possibly autistic, and he is really kind of the black sheep of this kind of like this small American town. No one kind of really wants to kind of be friends with him. He comes across as a little bit of a weirdo, and he seems to be a very kind of almost perverse young man. He's always trying to sort of like creep on women, even maybe possibly family members and things like that. So his mother and father go away somewhere, so they kind of hire this this older girl that's kind of like teenage, college age sort of girl to kind of be a babysitter slash housekeeper whilst they're away. And obviously he starts to get a kind of fixation with her, keeps kind of trying to sneak a look of her when she's asleep and things like this. Various kind of like stalkery kind of sexual behaviour kind of going on. And also at the same time, Jamie discovers there's this kind of like sort of large kind of 100 square foot pit roughly around a mile away from his house that contains 4 trolls. And now these trolls are kind of like almost like small Bigfoot, I guess you would say. I guess that makes them little feet. But anyway, so yeah, they're kind of like almost Bigfoot, but just kind of like small versions basically. And he's just kind of they're kind of his pets almost. He tries to feed them chocolate and things like that, and they're not interested. Eventually, he discovers obviously they like meat, and initially he kind of feeds them stuff from the butchers, runs out of money, and then decides he's going to kind of get rid of people he doesn't like and have been mean to him, and kind of lure people into this kind of like this area, and kind of ultimately feed them to this kind of like this group of trolls, troglodytes, whatever you want to call them. So that's kind of your basic setup of the movie. You might be thinking, why is this called Teddy? Its original title? Well, this is because that Jamie kind of talks to his Teddy, and it almost is kind of a well, I'm not quite sure where that goes, that plot point, I'll be honest. It kind of gives him advice. So initially you're thinking, obviously, he's somewhat of a mentally challenged young man, so it's clearly in his head. There is a scene that kind of contradicts that, so we'll discuss. So what did I like about The Pit? So this is a kind of a really kind of a schlocky B movie, obviously. It's obviously a fairly old movie by today's standards. And it kind of plays obviously like a kind of a 70s, early 80s film. It's, you know, relatively kind of slow, and it's not till the end you get the kind of the monsters on the loose kind of like scenes. But I've got to say, I really wanted to see where this film was going, because when I was watching, I was thinking, I don't actually know how this is going to end, because obviously our main character is essentially an antagonist, and he's a 12-year-old boy. So how are they going to kind of deal with it? And I will say it kind of ends in a very typical kind of 70s kind of like horror movie way, without kind of giving any spoilers away. But I was kind of intrigued thinking, where is this film going? Because obviously we have the immediate threat of these kind of creatures, and then we have obviously Jamie, who is, you know, clearly kind of mentally somewhat disturbed, but he's not necessarily evil. But just kind of selfish and kind of, and that, so he's not necessarily bad, but obviously has some kind of like selfish motivations. And then you kind of had this kind of like this Teddy. Is it something in his mind, or is it something kind of else? So it's a really kind of, I've got to say, quite an intriguing film to watch. Now, I was reading some of the reviews on this movie before I kind of did mine, and a lot of them kind of say the acting's no good. But I got to say, I actually disagree. I actually thought, certainly from Sammy Snyders, who plays Jamie, I've got to say, I thought he did a pretty good job, personally. I actually think he kind of gives a kind of almost a cute, but very kind of creepy and kind of like odd kind of like performance, which fits totally with his character. So I actually thought he was quite good. As is that kind of our secondary character, played by Janine Elias, who is the kind of the babysitter. I thought they actually, as the main characters, they did a pretty good performance. Now, I will concede that some of our kind of our supporting characters, particularly ones that have a kind of small speaking parts, maybe not so good. But there you go. And I've got to say, there are some somewhat disturbing. I mean, there's not loads of gore here, but we do see kind of creatures kind of like eating people and kind of like, you know, snacking on the living. So there is, you know, there's not a bad amount of gore, I would say, for this kind of like age of film, and kind of obviously with the kind of the budget that it has. And yeah, I've got to say, the main thing for me, I kind of like the story here, and led by the performance by our main sort of character here. What doesn't work? So this movie is just all kinds of silly and bizarre, and just doesn't kind of make sense in a lot of ways. For example, we have this like huge, like 100 square foot hole in the ground with these kind of trolls living at the bottom of it, but no one actually seems to see this hole. So when Jamie kind of lures people towards it, they literally just kind of walk into it and kind of just drop down without anyone actually seeing it. There's a couple that are in the dark, and you can arguably say they might not see it there, but some of them are in like broad daylight and literally just walk straight into this kind of hole. So it's just a little bit silly. The actual end of this movie, it kind of changes pace a little bit, because the focus comes off Jamie and more onto these kind of creatures once they actually escape out of this kind of this hole, and then it becomes more of a typical kind of creature on the loose movie. So it kind of loses a little bit of focus towards the end, I will say. The creature, you know, effects, they basically look like scary Ewoks, is the best way I can describe it. Obviously, it's a low budget, you know, older film, but I gotta say, I thought the effects, although kind of a little cheesy looking, even for the time, were still fairly effective, I would say. But I can see why some people would say they look a little bit crappy. There's also some inconsistencies in the logic with this movie outside of the kind of the pit itself. I mentioned Teddy. It seems like a superfluous plot thread to me, having him kind of talk to this kind of this teddy bear, because it really doesn't add anything to the story, to be honest, outside of you think he's crazy, but then we see a scene without Jamie in it, so he's off somewhere else, and the babysitter's tidying up the room, and the teddy's head kind of moves around and kind of looks at her when she's not looking, to suggest it's kind of somehow sentient or kind of possessed or something, but it's never really mentioned again. So in regards to, you know, the actual Teddy, I really don't know what the kind of the where that plot thread was going, because if it was just in his head, this was that scene that didn't even involve him. So you know, why did it kind of turn around? So that scene alone kind of just makes the whole Teddy kind of character almost weird and unexplained. But there you go. I guess we just have to accept it's kind of somehow some kind of haunted Teddy that we are just never told anything about. But there you go. Yeah, and so like I've said, so the movie is just a kind of just a little bizarre, and possibly a little uncomfortable as well, because like I said, this is a 12-year-old boy, and he, you know, it gets into some sort of fairly kind of lecherous territory in regards to some of the kind of the sexual overtones that this movie has. There's a reasonable amount of nudity in it, actually, through a few different sort of characters and stuff, and you know, it's certainly by today's more progressive standards. I feel people may be a bit more offended than they were in 1981, because it does come across as a bit more shocking now almost than it probably did then. So that's probably going to be a taste thing. Overall though, as a kind of a weird little B-movie oddity, I actually kind of enjoyed it, and I actually thought just the story and that, and actually kind of the character of Jamie and the actor's performance were actually kind of like very intriguing, and this is a slower moving film, as they are kind of in this kind of age, but nonetheless I was actually quite interested in kind of to see where this movie goes up, and the actual you know, when the creatures are going to quite fun as well, and you never really know what they're going to do and how they're going to react with Jamie and things like that. So for me, there's things that kind of like wanted me to see where it was going, and we have this kind of like this police chief who just seems to be incompetent and wants to cover everything up because it's a small town. He doesn't want to kind of feel like he's been kind of misled and stuff like that. And the ending maybe is a little rushed, I will say. Overall, I've got to say, I would probably recommend this movie if you like older, sort of obscure horror movies, because I don't hear a lot of people talking about this one. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. I think it's worth a watch if you are into that kind of genre film. But like I've said, if you are of a, you know, somewhat of a kind of a sensitive type, you may be put off by some of the weird kind of decisions that maybe seem bizarre now. I mean, this movie has no qualms about killing kids, disabled grandmas, nothing. They're all for the chopping block. A 6 out of 10 for me. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? If you have, please leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.